Hello, good evening, everyone. Professor Carl and colleagues, good evening. This is my presentation of the peer state of the art on written corrective feedback on students' writing and its impact on grammar improvement at the secondary level by Magdalena, Krystyna, Sławińska. So let's start. The title, in my personal point of view and perception, it's very engaging and seems to be very clearly and specific down to the detail niche, which is a secondary level and students at this stage. So for this presentation, I've taken into consideration some of the aspects like the introduction, why the paper, why read it, and why the research, the problem, what is not known, the objective of the study, they give background to judge and understand the paper, and the related research to previous work, maximum 4 strong references, which is though suggested, but it might be more, and the hypothesis if it's stated. So let's proceed. Why the paper? Why read it and why the research? And this information was found in the introduction. It's about corrective feedback. Corrective feedback. So why the paper? Well, there are some approaches to teaching an English second language writing. And although many sources describe the methods of teaching writing to the English as a second language students at the secondary level, the ultimate approach still remains unknown. So why read it? Why the research? Well, teaching how to write brings a large number of answers to the questions about fostering students' grammar skill. That's one of the reasons. And then different researchers focus on the effect of feedback and its benefits for the learner's writing abilities and grammar abilities. So if we are interested about how to do this and how to foster these abilities, we should be engaged in doing that. And then there is a lot of debate still of whether or not written corrective feedback is beneficial or harmful for the learners. So let's continue. The problem, well, it's found at the end of the introduction, and it says that it's still uncertain if written corrective feedback is useful for the teachers and their students. We still do not know. So more research needs to be conducted to help teachers provide their students with meaningful feedback that will foster their skills. So, what is not known? Let's see. Well, the best way is still not known, or what's the best teaching approach that best benefits students when teaching writing? Since writing is so difficult, it's still not clear which one is the best. So, teachers, since they don't know yet what is the best option, they often struggle to decide what approach they should endorse. Let's continue. So what's the objective of this study? Well, because, of course, there's still not enough discussion or evidence about providing effective feedback on students' grammar, there has to be more research and studies that contribute better and more significantly to give an answer on feedback area by conducting what? An empirical research. So what's the background to judge and understand the paper? Well, let's see. There, as stated before, there has been numerous research on how to teach learners to write focus on grammar, but there's no consensus. And other approaches, methods have tried to improve the way that this is achieved, but still not very successful. So some argue on favors and others disagree that it is functional, that it gives a positive flashback, that it does give encouragement to students to continue on their work. So students, regardless of what they have said, students show high appreciation on the teacher's feedback. Students have demonstrated and still say that feedback is very important for them, even though sometimes they just might tend to just look at the grade and not look at the corrections. They still appreciate a lot on that. And cognitive and sociocultural factors may have an impact on students' learning process. That's something to have in consideration for further explanation in my presentation. All this is on written corrective feedbacks on students' writing. So what is the related research to previous work? Here is the main piece of the chunk of the cake. Let's see. First, there is a process and model that is stated in the state of the art of Magdalena that she demonstrates that is the most beneficial one for the English as a second language learners. It focuses on learners' constant process and linguistic development. And there is, she mentions various and a number of authors. And it's like it's shown here, it's a process in which there is a possible input by the teacher, by learners, and by the texts. Well, the teacher's approach, it's another way in which the student-teacher relationship, and the teacher is responsible for the human behavior or for the affective characteristics that happen during human behavior, and it's a social thing. About grammar. And grammar, first there has been this belief that a grammar is an scaffolder approach. Students learn easy grammar first at the beginning and then progressively learn more complex and more difficult structures, like a linear growth. But there is not consensus on that, and there's still some other researchers stating in the state of the art that disagree. But then, to make it more fun and more enjoyable, this state-of-the-art remarks that the grammar should be blended with communicative approach, and thus, in this case, it will make it more enjoyable. So what's the related research to previous work? Well, the previous work, there has been consensus about peer check feedback, which is by Bergen in 2015, that mentions that it's an effective method of learning how to write. It is efficient if teachers guide their students. South 2014 agrees on that. And what are the pros? Well, there is positive watchback, and students become more conscious of their writing process, and there is an improvement in their grammar. What are the cons? Well, there are time constraints. Students' characteristics, some of the students might be high students, some other intermediate, and some other low students. So it might be efficient, sometimes not. The teacher plays a huge role, and the teacher has to be a constant guide and not leave students alone on this. And there must be or might be a lack of instruction sometimes in this. What's in the research? In the research, there is direct feedback, which they mention in the state of the art that is beneficial while practicing for a short-term task, whilst in the indirect feedback should be given on long-term exercises. And then we have the cognitive and sociocultural factors that may have an impact on students' learning process, featured on Storage 2012. So here's what I believe is the hypothesis. It's in the conclusion, but it was also the beginning in a way. I'm going to read it. So although significant and useful conclusions have been published and are put into practice amongst the ESL teachers around the world, there's still not enough discussion or evidence about providing effective feedback on students' grammar. So thus, more research and studies are needed to fill the existing gap and acquiring knowledge that will benefit English as a second language teachers and their learners. So after considering and analyzing the data gathered in this literature review, it can be concluded that a significant contribution can be made to feedback area by conducting empirical research. So what Magdalena is suggesting here is that there's a need for more and then more in-depth research, but especially in empirical research that contains a method that contains a number and digits research that can be more concluding and have more conclusions with not only opinions but also let's say some numbers, some strong ground, so where we can go farther from there. And so this is my presentation. I believe it's a very good state of the art. There is still a lot to go on, and there's still a lot for room and improvement, but very well done, Magdalena.